been sober. Oh my gosh, you guys, I'm really excited you're here today. I'm really happy you're here. If you're here for the first time, welcome. I'm so glad you made it. I hope you subscribe and I hope you come back. If you're back, I'm so glad you're here. So glad you're here. I have Rabbi Michael Perice. Did I say it right?
Perice. Close.
Perice.
Very close.
Perice. Oh my
You'll
gosh, you
get it.
guys,
You'll get it.
I'll get it. I'll get it. And we've been talking so much before pressed record, and I just had to say, "Oh my gosh, Michael, I've got to press record," because there's so many good things that we're going to talk about today. And as you guys know, I am all about religion and God and politics and just finding some more truth so we can help people out there that are struggling with this disease of addiction. And I want to say thank you so much to your people that reached out to me to ask me if you could come on the show. It's so
Very
nice to meet
grateful
you,
too.
Michael. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you. I'm really grateful to be here.
It's amazing, isn't it? Because it's so funny because we both well, I did not grow up in Philadelphia. I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri.
Okay.
But you grew up in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, on the
Yep.
other side of the Ben Franklin Bridge.
Yeah. So Philly is our city. If you're in North Jersey, New York's your city. But I feel like a Philly boy. And now that I'm in LA, it's a new kind of experience to be away from, my family and the culture that I was kind of raised in.
You'll always be an Eagles fan though, right?
Always. Die hard. I mean, when I left my last synagogue, they gave us like Dodgers hats and jerseys. And I was like, very nice gift, but I don't know if I could wear that in public just yet. But my son is wearing the Dodgers hat. He's two. He loves it. So I don't know. It's kind of hard to think he might not be a Phillies fan, but we'll see.
It's so it's so funny because I grew up as a Cardinals fan and then I moved to Philadelphia and my kids they'd wear the Cardinals stuff, but then of course the Philly stuff
It's dangerous to wear another team's jersey in Philadelphia. We are passionate sports fanatics. I will put it that way.
it's so true and I love it and it's amazing. So I did cheat and I went and Googled you and I read the article about you in the Jewish Exponent, which is a Philadelphia newspaper for those of you guys that don't know what it is. And but I know your recovery journey started in 2007, but I want to know what happened before that. Like, what was your childhood like? What was it like
Yeah.
growing up? Just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. So, we were talking a little beforehand, and my parents come from completely different worlds. My mom comes from a very well-to-do Jewish family in the Philadelphia area. They own Jewish funeral homes, so a family business. And my father comes from an Italian Catholic family in Camden. His father, my grandfather, was a bookie. He was truly a bookie. Very, very different worlds. And, my father worked down in AC in the casinos, and my mom was down there vacationing. They had a beach house, and she told her grandfather she wanted to get a job in the casinos. He said, "I forbid you to do that." And she did it anyway, and she met my dad, and they were both dealers, and they fell in love. Back then, that was probably rarer than it is today. Interfaith marriage is very common today. Back then, it was a little taboo, especially not because just of the religious part, but socioeconomics. So they created this weird person in me sometimes. I feel that. But yeah, because my mom worked in Philly and my dad worked down the shore, Cherry Hill was like a nice middle ground. And I was raised in a Jewish home. My father converted, and it was your typical suburban upbringing. My parents are great. I have a very close relationship with my family. But then something happened when I was about 10. My rabbi had his wife murdered. So this was
Remember that
that's a very
story.
famous story in the 90s.
Oh,
He
I totally
Yeah,
remember
his name
that.
was Fred Newlander. He paid two
Yes.
congregants to murder his wife. He was a true sociopath and unrepentant to the day he died, which I believe was like a month ago. And so, as a 10-year-old, you know, this is a person I was told to admire and respect. You feel almost like the rug has been pulled out beneath you. And so, I'm already a rebellious kid. So I'm like, I don't know if I believe in God. I don't know. I don't think I can trust any of these rabbis. I was pretty much kind of just done with the whole thing. And I would take my grandmother on the high holidays just to be a good grandson, but I didn't really have much of a connection to like organized Judaism for a long time after that. And I wasn't the only one. Many people tell me to this day they can't go back into a synagogue because of what this guy did.
Okay, this is so crazy
Yeah.
because I'm obviously I like to look for how we're like similar in this way. And even though I went and so I was raised Catholic, right? My
Yeah.
dad's Jewish, my mom Irish Catholic, my dad Jewish. My parents probably got married. Parents got married in 1966 or 67, right?
Mhm.
And my I know my mom's older sister wanted to marry somebody that was Jewish. My grandparents forbid it, said no.
Yeah.
By the time my mom came, the youngest daughter, my mom fell in love with the Jewish man, and my grandparents said, okay, right? But
Yeah.
I had that same sort of like, okay, wait a minute. Mom's is Catholic, dad's Jewish. What are we doing? My mom wanted to raise us both. It was total confusion. And then the Catholic Church, what happened in the Catholic Church with the priests was I mean, and it was
Well,
also
I call it religious trauma, and a lot
right.
of people have it. Mine was very specific, but I meet, now working in an addiction treatment facility, you meet tons of people who had these negative experience with religion as children. And it shapes how they view faith and spirituality. And part of what I think is powerful about my history, but also my job, is that I can help like show them a different way. That maybe just like I was, and we'll get to it, I jumped to conclusions because of how young I was being turned off to religion.
I think it's so huge because I
It
agree
could
with
rob
you.
us of our faith.
I mean, it's like this darkness that's come
Yeah.
that nobody wants to believe. I mean, yesterday, for those that don't know, I have this herniated disc and I had to go in yesterday and the doctor was trying to find, the spot in my back. It's in the middle of my back. Anyway, it was horrible. I was laying there for like 45 minutes. They didn't find it, whatever. It was jabbing, jabbing, jabbing. And I talked about God a lot. And the people in there were kind of looking at me like, what? You're talking about God? And I'm like, yes. Like if I don't have God, I have nothing. And I
Yeah.
think it is really, our people are starving for it. Do you agree?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like people are falling off a cliff without a net. But I also understand, there's a famous quote that says, you know, religion can make good people better. Religion can make bad people evil. It could be used for, and a lot of unfortunate spiritual leaders were probably very bad people, and it turned off a whole segment of our population off to having faith in their lives. So my hope is that they will be open enough, curious enough, humble enough to realize that one person shouldn't determine for them what their relationship to God should look like. But that's a hard thing. That's a hard thing to undo. So yeah, I had that, and I recognize it in other people for sure.
I am just, it's so fascinating. I can't wait to get into this even more, but I
Let's
want to go back
go.
to your story. So you grow up so at 10, this goes on at your synagogue. You stop
Yeah,
going,
so it's like it's just a wild time, and nowadays, had this happen, they sit us down and they would talk to us and there'd be class. There was nothing like that. It was just kind of a thing. And like people, they couldn't sweep it under the rug. It was national news. So, I think that I was just kind of, yeah, I was done. And, it was also a few years later, 9/11 happened, and you started seeing like the evils of religion. You saw the worst parts of religion in the post 9/11 world, and how religion could be used for extremism in many different faiths. And I just remember feeling like totally turned off to the whole thing. And so I was a secular Jew, if you. I wasn't an atheist, but I was agnostic. I didn't know if I believed. I didn't know what I believed. I wanted to be more of a logic and science person. And so, I was very much interested in international affairs, politics to a degree. And so I thought I'd maybe, because I wanted to change the world, 9/11 and then the wars in Iraq. I remember thinking just the world was so chaotic. It felt so broken. I mean, almost nothing compared to what people feel now, right? But
Mm-hmm.
like even
Mm-hmm.
then it felt like there was something deeply wrong with society, and maybe it's all connected. So when I went to school, as I was telling you, I first went to school in Florida for 2 years, and then I went to Temple in Philly. I wanted to study politics and history and international relations. I wanted to have a deeper understanding of our systems and our society and what was broken about it, what could be fixed. Um, but then this is where my story, I guess, gets interesting, if you want to call it that. I was driving home from school one day. I was a commuter, and I was at a bottom of like a hill at a red light. And in my rear view mirror, I saw a woman texting on her phone as she was driving, and she must have been going 50 miles an hour. And so I knew she was going to hit me. I was completely prepared for it. I tensed up my whole body waiting for the impact. And within seconds, boom. And so I had like a shoulder issue, like whiplash, but my issue was a disc issue, like L4, L5. And I was getting horrible nerve pain down my leg. I mean, horrible nerve pain. Like I would wake up in the middle of the night, my leg was completely numb. It felt like somebody was ripping the muscle apart. And I lived in a building, and I'd have to walk up and down the steps just to get the sensation to ease. I said, who could live like this? Who could live with this pain? So I went to a doctor. This is 2007. I'm saying that because we live in a different world. You go to a doctor today, physical therapy, injections. The first thing they did, the first, was give me Vicodin. The first thing. That would almost never happen today. Now, here's a disclaimer. Many doctors at this time, I think, were really bad. Mine wasn't. I think he generally thought that it was okay, that he didn't want to see his patient in pain. Many doctors were lied to. The pharmaceutical companies told them they were non-addictive medicines. Some doctors abused that. Some of them, had to learn a hard lesson watching this, epidemic kind of like unroll.
It's so funny because I do want to, because I'm interjecting a little bit because I
Please.
literally I'm going through this right now. I'm going
Yeah.
through, it's in between T6 and 7 and 7 and 8, okay, in the thoracic, where it sounds like yours was as well. And my doctor, I got to the doctor's office in Boca Raton, Florida, and they were like, "Can you give us a urine sample?" And I'm like, "Wait a minute, I didn't even have to do that when I just went to my annual appointment for my
Yeah.
GYN, not to share too much, but I had to go to that. And
Yeah.
I was like, don't you want to? And they're like,
It's
no.
shocking. Like, why are you asking for a
And that's
urine
why I
sample?
said, and he was like, because we're pain management, I have to make sure that you are
Mm,
not, this
using
isn't hot.
drugs.
And it was, and also with him, because I haven't been taking anything except for really, I take Advil for
Yeah.
this because I don't want it. But
Which is also partly my fear, because while pain wasn't my only trigger, I do worry one day if I'm in a serious, that worries me. But you're right. And I think it's an overreaction probably to a degree, because Florida was so bad, you could
Yep.
go into a doctor and go next door and they give you the prescription. And like that was a well-known, they didn't have a database back then. So I
Yeah.
think there's kind of a pendulum that swung in the other direction.
For sure. It was so crazy. I was like, but I mean, I don't want to judge anybody. We talked about judgment before we started recording, but
Yeah.
I did see some people that I was like, well, it looks like nobody's in pain here. Why are they coming? But it's not for me
Well,
to
maybe
judge.
different types of pain, but you don't know, and it makes you feel like, though, and I will say that I have a family member who has CRPS, which is a chronic nerve disease, chronic pain disease, and even though I think opiates in particularly have been severely misused and abused, there are still people who need them. So I'm not an opiate abolitionist. I have a lot of sympathy for people who are in chronic pain. I abused it, and we will get back to my story, but I still want to have like the humility and sensitivity that there are people in chronic pain that should be able to maybe get these medications. I mean, I'm not a doctor, so I don't want to be the one to decide who
Oh,
and who can't have them. I'm just saying that, my experience, my story.
And I appreciate that. And I'll tell you, yesterday he said to my doctor, he said to, I'm not going to say his name because I didn't ask him if I could, but he didn't. I said, well, I'm in pain right now. And he's like, well, I'm not. And my husband goes, don't give her any opiates, we're sober. And I
Yeah.
was going to say that myself anyway, but he's like, I'm not going to give you any, but I might give you a Valium for tomorrow because I'm trying to do this again, get this, the
And
epidural in. And
you need to be relaxed to get,
right, exactly. So I'm just going to do one. He's like, I'll give you two. I'm like, well, that'll be fine. I'll just take one and then take the other one and be done with it. But it is something that I think that there's a lot of people today that are more aware than ever
yeah.
before, right?
Yeah, it's complicated because, like you said, you're contending with a real issue, a real pain. How do you negotiate that? How do you keep your sobriety? These are things I constantly think about. These are things many people who were originally prescribed opiates for pain issues have to contend with. So we are dealing with the the repercussions of this time period where they were kind of give out like Pez, like
Yeah,
candy.
yeah,
So and
exactly.
that's what happened. I was given like my initial prescription, but pain medicine's not really pain medicine, right? It's a mask. It doesn't really solve your pain. And in
No.
fact, I thought it was increasing my pain as I was coming off. So I went back and I got a higher level. And I went back and I got a higher level. By the fourth time, my doctor said, I'm not giving you any more pain medicine. But I was already hooked. I mean, I had tried many different drugs in my life. Nothing ever stuck. I never would have thought of myself as an addict, but opiates, something about opiates, the pain, maybe even like medicating depression and anxiety that I had. It put me in such a state of
Mm.
calm and peace until it wore off. And then, well, that's when it gets really interesting because then you got to go to different doctors. Now, I was in legitimate pain. I was prescribed my medicine. How could that be an addiction? I said. Well, I didn't know it was called doctor shopping. I didn't know, that I was abusing my prescriptions trying to get them earlier and earlier. So it's kind of like a vicious circle pain medicine where your tolerance goes up and it works less. It's not a good situation.
Okay, so now you're chasing this stuff, as I always say. You're living in private hell, completely. I mean, it's literally you have no freedom because it's
And
like
it's
we're
private. I was really good at keeping it from everyone and anyone for a long time.
how long?
So this started in like late 06, 07. And then I went into recovery in 2011. So
Wow,
what
that's
what what
5 years.
that's 5 years. And it's amazing to me today thinking, how did I get the money every day? How did I I can still remember the stress at when the addiction was at its worst. I was taking about 160 milligrams of Oxycontin every day. They were two 80 milligram pills. And then I would also take fentanyl, but it was pharmaceutical grade. They had these fentanyl lollipops. Nobody knew about like fentanyl back then. And even then, I realized it was so much stronger than like even like an OxyContin. Um, but had it been like street fentanyl, I wouldn't be alive. Like, thankfully, it was like through a pharmaceutical company, so I knew exactly what I was getting. But that was rare. That was like harder to get your hands on. But it kind of gave me an insight to later on what this fentanyl epidemic would look like.
That is just
Yeah.
so scary. That is
Yeah.
so, so scary. Okay,
Yeah.
did your parents have any idea? Were they like, he's
So
acting really weird?
so
Like, what is up with him?
my parents knew I took pain medicine because they knew I was in an accident. They didn't have any idea how bad it had gotten. And as I always say, eventually you borrow every dollar you could borrow, you tell every lie you can tell, or you steal every dollar you can steal, and you hit a wall. And I hit my wall in 2011. I went into withdrawal, and opiate withdrawal was like a hell that I can't fully express to people.
Wait a minute. Why did you decide to go? Now, wait a minute. Was this like you finally said, all right, you woke up one day
Hell
and you
no.
said,
I just
no.
ran out of every option. I couldn't
Okay,
get
so
it.
nobody would give you any money. You had
Yeah,
no
yeah.
more doctors to call. So
Yeah.
you're at your house and you're probably sweating your butt off, literally
That
and
sweating my
figuratively.
butt off doesn't even begin. Let me put it this way for people who've never been in withdrawal. if I took your food and water, how long could you go? Could you go 24 hours, 36, 72? How long before you would do anything and everything to get the thing you need to survive? That is what like an addiction's like. And the pain of withdrawal, minutes last for hours, hours last for days, and days seem to last for an eternity. You are trapped in your body like a prisoner. I was as sick as I've ever felt. And I
By
would have done
yourself. Are you by
by
yourself, by the
myself.
way?
And I would have done anything to make it stop. And that's important to know for what happens next. I finally get a hold of a friend who's no longer alive, but I said, I'm in a bad way. He says, I got you. I'll be there in an hour. 3 hours later, he shows up. He says, brother, I got to go. Feel well. Not like get high, have fun, feel well. He knows. And he hands me a brown paper bag. I go back into my apartment. I open the bag and it's heroin. And I had never done heroin. I never wanted to do heroin. Heroin, like, it scared me. It scared me. Because I was like, at least I knew as with pharmaceuticals, I could, know exactly what I was taking. And so, but I want to be very clear. I was as prepared to do this as anything. Like I said, I would have done anything for the pain to go away. And this is where my life changed. I went into the bathroom and I snorted pills. So I was going to snort the heroin, and I put it on the back of my toilet. And I was viscerally sick, and to this day I can't fully explain it. I don't even really bother trying. But something washed over me. It was like a calmness. It seemed to last for a while, but it must have only lasted for seconds. It was distinct because I was physically sick, and all of a sudden I was very calm. And I kind of like, I don't know. I saw in my head that if I did it, I was going to die. I don't know if I was like having some kind of panic response, but it was almost like a vision that if I did it, I was going to die. I don't know if I was going to die then and there. I don't know what. I just had this like feeling like in my mind, like I was going to die. And like the calmness was lasted long enough for me to flush it down the toilet. And then the second I did, it wore off. And I immediately felt like I had made the worst decision of my life. And that is when I called my parents and I said, I am really in a bad way and I need help. And they were shocked and upset and concerned. And they wanted to put me into rehab. But because I wanted to have a career in politics, I refused to go to rehab. I thought that was going to ruin my life going to rehab. Not the drugs. The drugs weren't going to ruin my life. Going to rehab was somehow going to ruin my life. So my family has means. And the next day, they got me a private addiction doctor to see, which I was very grateful for. And, I went to see this doctor the next day, and he said, there's this new thing called medically assisted treatment. Some people think it's controversial. He's like, if, there's this medicine, it's called buprenorphine. He says it doesn't work for everybody, but he says, I think it could save your life. If you do exactly what I say, if you listen to exactly the regimen I give you, and you don't, quite frankly, F around, I think it could save your life. And that's all I wanted. And I went on this medicine, and it helped me with the withdrawals. It helped me with the cravings, but it was only one part of my recovery. I was missing like the communal and spiritual part. So back then, I went to an NA meeting, and back then, unfortunately, if you were on this medicine, you weren't really accepted into AA and NA. And I was made very well aware that they weren't going to. So I kind of read the big book and did the steps on my own. I didn't really have anybody. Nobody would help me. So I kind of did it on my own. It was like another step in my recovery, but I was still missing something. And this is where my life really changed. I couldn't keep a job, so I went to work for my family's funeral home. And it's a Jewish funeral home, and I started working with rabbis. And for the first time, I realized all this baggage I had not explored. And I like started really thinking like, wow, I really hated rabbis, and I didn't know why. I didn't even thought about what my rabbi had done. And they were these amazing rabbis helping these people. I thought, wow, maybe I could be Jewish again. Not that I could be a rabbi. Maybe I could be Jewish again. And I started learning about, I almost forgot everything I had once learned. And I started learning again. And I started becoming a Jew again, going to services. And starting over from nothing was humbling. It was I was embarrassed, but it helps me with people today who don't know anything. But at no point do I think I'm going to be a rabbi. Uh, that happens a little later.
Okay, I you
Yeah.
get a sip of your water. Oh my gosh. I am like, for one, anybody who knows me and you don't know me, but you're gonna now we're friends. So
Yeah.
but when you talked about being in the bathroom
Yeah.
and the heroin being on the toilet, the back of the toilet,
Yeah.
all I could think about was your guardian angels and God coming down there and saying, "Oh my gosh, we don't want you to do this. We don't want you to do
At
this."
the
And for
time, I'll be honest, at the time, it didn't feel spiritual because in the moment, but later on, it did feel that way to me. I don't like expect anybody to like understand that. I don't fully understand it. I really don't. But it was so real to me. And the things I don't really talk about is that earlier in that day, I was like, I wasn't very religious, but I was kind of cursing God. Why am I so bad? Like, why is this happening? Like fighting with God, and I don't know. It was something I wanted to understand better. And that was part of the catalyst that kind of pushed me to wanting to understand religion and faith in a deeper way. Because
did
it,
you
it
had
felt so, yeah.
did you have a bar mitzvah?
Yeah, I
Because
did have a
I
bar
you
mitzvah.
did. Okay, so you did go ahead and have your bar mitzvah.
But yeah,
Yeah,
so the rabbi thing happened at 10. I,
yeah.
I went through the process to 13, and then after 13, I was pretty much done. Yeah.
Because I just think that it's so, what I've seen this year alone, and you don't know this, but I'm going to tell you. So I was invited to go to Medjugorje. You probably don't
Okay.
even know
I
where
don't
that
even know
is.
what that is.
You have no idea where it is. It's in Bosnia. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Herzegovina. Okay. So all the way over the pond, through the woods to grandma's house I went. But I was invited to go. And at this point, I'd been studying because I've been sober for almost 18 years, right? And the God thing has become so important to me. It is like I talk about it all the time. I talk about politics.
You know what? You know what 18 in Jewish symbolism means? It means life.
Oh my gosh, because I need to know that because I know that there's so many things in numerology that go to get.
18 is what we call chai, and that represents life. It's a very important number in Judaism. In fact, many Jews, when they make a donation to a synagogue, they'll do it in multiples of 18.
Isn't that what
Um,
you do at a bar mitzvah? Because I remember writing
yeah,
checks
too.
for my kids going because I'm like,
18,
yeah.
36. Well, I'm not good at math, but whatever the yeah, so 18's got a very powerful number in, Kabbalah and Jewish symbolism and numerology. Yeah. So I think about that as like your life moment, 18.
It truly feels like that. But I was asked to go to Medjugorje, which I had heard about because my friend Amanda told me about it. And so it's where the Blessed Mother, so Jesus's mother,
Okay.
has been appearing since 1981. And
Wow.
most people go, "That's crazy. That's crazy. These kids in
Yeah.
this field had her come down." And I was kind
Mm,
of still like, "What is? Are you?
yeah.
What? Kind of like your thing. You kind of
Yeah.
look at
What are those moments?
what are those? I'm skeptic, right?
And everybody, and I am a naturally skeptical person too. And I was as like, you know, I told you, as logical, science based, but like there's these things that happen and they're hard to explain. Now, you could say that I was withdrawing. It could have been brain chemistry. It could have been, I'm open to whatever, but it felt later on very spiritual. I connected it in that way. And to me, it's like, how do you find meaning? It's just about how we find meaning. Nobody else has to believe it. Nobody else has to understand it. I do. And like, sometimes that's all that's needed. It doesn't need to be pushed on anybody else.
I agree with you so much. It's so crazy. I'm like just sitting here, like I'm nodding my head like one of those
I
head
think a
things.
lot of people have things like this. I think if you're open to it, and I had to be open to like anything and everything. I think God, whatever God is for you, and in AA they said like the God of your own understanding. God could be a million different things. We all have different conceptions of God, but the one thing I'm almost certain about is like you have to be open to it. If you're closed, it's like an energy. If you're closed off to it, in Jewish mysticism, the way they explain like this kind of connection is like imagine you're standing next to a heater, right? You put your hands up. It's going to feel really hot, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now take 5 steps back. What's it going to feel like? It's going to feel like a little less hot. Take 10 steps back. You might barely feel it. And if you take 30, you're going to be so far removed from the heat, you're not going to feel the source. So it's kind of like, we have to be close to the source. We have to be open to it. The further removed, we're not going to feel it. So I was, guess, very close at that moment.
Wow. You know what's so funny? I was at the airport and I was in the Austin airport on Monday afternoon and I make friends at the airport. I'm one of those people, as you could probably tell. I'm really, I love to talk to
Very
people.
social.
Very social. And this gentleman was sitting next to me and he's like, "Wait, you guys are sober?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I've been sober for almost 18 years. My husband's been sober for 25."
I love
And
that. People used to not be able to do that. That's like the coolest thing now. That
isn't
everybody feel, you shouldn't feel shame. Nobody would ask for this. Nobody would ask to have an addiction.
are you
So like
kidding?
I always said, I remember feeling shame and guilt that I almost ruined my life, but later on I go, why should I be ashamed of this? Who would ask for this? Nobody would want this. I didn't ask for this. So like why? And then, I turned it into something positive, which I think is, we'll get to what that principle in Judaism is all about, but it's very important.
Well, you know what's so interesting? Because when I first got sober, I had so much shame. Both of my grandmothers,
Yeah.
my Jewish grandmother, which my mother used to say, "Jews don't drink, Elizabeth. I can't believe your grandmother was an alcoholic." Because I'm like, "Well, okay, she was, Mom."
Yeah.
And my Irish Catholic.
Jews in particular have like a heavy stigma of addiction. That it could because they're minorities and they have to do everything right, but yeah.
So my Jewish grandmother, who I adored, and my Irish Catholic grandmother, who I also adored, were both alcoholics, right? So
Yeah.
when I got this, because my parents would talk, and there was no solution back then, right? Because
Yeah,
my
yeah.
grandmothers, they were born in like 1913. No solution, right? They weren't going to AA meetings. They
Yeah.
weren't like
Didn't
doing any of
exist.
that stuff. You just die like that, right? You just
Yeah.
die as an alcoholic. And so for me, I first patented sober, not ashamed. That was my first
Yeah.
thing I went out because I was like, I have so much shame. I'm going to
Yeah.
just go buy this patent that says I'm not ashamed, even though I
Yeah.
was. I wanted to really counteract it. And then this guy in this airport I was just talking to on Monday, I said to him, "Oh my gosh, I'm sober." And he goes, "You're totally sober?" I said, "Yeah, I'm 100% sober. So you don't do anything?" I'm like, "No, we don't do anything." And he was like, "Wow." And I said, "You know what the best part about it is?" And he goes, "What?" I said, "I don't ever miss God's little winks. I get to see
Yeah.
beauty everywhere."
You're open to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're not numbing it. Addiction is like numbing so much of the world because we just can't handle it for whatever reason, whether it's physical pain or trauma or anxiety or depression or it's, but only through being truly open, vulnerable, authentic. That's how I believe divinity, holiness, whatever you want to call it, comes into our lives and in our relationships. Oh,
Mm,
if I'm lying to you, if I am being somebody I'm not meant to be, we can't form a real bond.
mm-mm.
You know, and like, but when you're really authentic and vulnerable, you form those bonds with people. You really connect. And I like to think God is in there's a thing that says that in the Torah that when the ancient Israelites were wandering in the desert, they built the tabernacle, the dwelling place of God in the desert. And it was made out of like all these types of wood, but the connector pieces were gold. And the interpretation is that was God. God is the connection between us all. I
Oh, I
believe
love
that.
that. That's
Yeah,
beautiful.
I love it. God. That's how it feels to me. God is the gold. That's the connection. The connector is God between us. But we have to be open to that. We have to be willing for that.
We have to get closer and feel the warmth. I love that. So
Yeah,
you're in the funeral home with your parents and your
yeah.
whoever else is working there. It's such okay, what a heavy
All my
place.
cousins, all my mom.
Oh
Yeah.
my God.
So
And what a heavy place. Well, probably not you guys behind
I
the
grew
scene.
up in it, but it's not heavy in the ways you would think. People like people work in funeral homes have like a dark sense of humor, a lot of joking, probably a way to naturally decompress. It's not as heavy as you would think, but it is a very important, meaningful job. And I'm working the funeral home. I'm a year in recovery, and there was a snowstorm. It was 2012. I'll never forget. And all the funerals but one were canceled. there was a gentleman who died, and his sister, he must have been in his 90s. She must have been in her 80s, and she was in a wheelchair. Now, in the old Jewish cemeteries, the monuments are so close together you could barely walk through them. With snow, it was like impossible. So she had to sit in the car. That was the decision that was made. And I remember thinking that was heartbreaking, that she had to sit in the car for her own brother's funeral. And so the funeral's happening, and I knock on the window, and I say, "Ma'am, my name's Michael. I'm from the funeral home. Can I sit with you?" It's also really cold. So I get in the car, and they're like, it's in this van. They're pilot seats. She's staring out the window, and it's dead silent. And I just say, "Would you like to tell me something about your brother?" And she like turned her body to me like she was just being waited to being asked that question. And she told me very, very powerful stories. He saved their life. They were Holocaust survivors. There are stories I don't tell, but they were very intimate, very tragic, and as you can imagine. But I had an epiphany in the moment. It was the first time I think I'd ever really listened to somebody. Like, I'm always talking. My whole life up to that point, I'm always the one talking. I remember listening, like really listening to her. And I was 25, 26. It was a crazy feeling. And I wasn't very Jewish at the time. I was starting to explore my Judaism, and I only knew one prayer. It was called the Mourner's Kaddish. It's a famous Jewish prayer that's said when somebody dies, or at the funeral, or in the anniversary of the death of a loved one. And we say it in every Jewish service for the people who have passed. Only prayer I know. And I could hear them doing it. And I said, "Ma'am, would you like to say the Mourner's Kaddish with me?" And we said it together. And at the end, the look on her face, the only way I can say it is like I gave her the greatest gift that anybody's ever given anybody. And I walked out of the car like, whatever that was, I want to do that. I don't know what that was, but I want that feeling to always be a part of my life. And I told this story about a week later to somebody, um, and they go, "You should be a rabbi." I said, "I can't be a fucking rabbi." Excuse my life. But that's what I said. I said, like, "Do you know my life?" I said, "I can't do this." They're like, "Maybe you could." And there was a rabbinical school down the street. They said, "Why don't you go speak to somebody?" I went. They said, "You could be a rabbi. You don't know nearly enough to be a rabbi. You need to learn more." And so I went to Israel for a year, and I guess I studied just enough to get accepted. And I went to rabbinical school for 6 years. And that was another part of my recovery. That was like really the stuff that made me the person I am today, because I was self-centered. I wasn't a bad person, but I wasn't a good person. And it just taught me how to be humble, patient, open-minded, real open-minded in a way that I never was. And yeah, I'm always still growing, but it was a powerful thing. But I always knew I wanted to share this story. And I when I got my first job out of rabbinical school, which was 2020, right as the pandemic started, I was in a small congregation in Cinnaminson, New Jersey, which is close to Philadelphia, and I knew that I could share this. My wife, who's never done a drug in her life, doesn't know anything about this world, didn't want me to do it because she was worried that I was going to throw away everything that I worked so hard for. But I wanted to honor me, the people we've lost, to say that if a rabbi can be this, anybody could be this. And for the most part, most people thought it was a positive thing. Some people, there's always people who are going to be your detractors. Um, but the story spread like wildfire. It just went everywhere. Like the news spread. Like, I knew putting rabbi before the story would make it more interesting, but I didn't know how it would affect people and impact people. And I got thousands of emails. And one of the emails I got was from I work at a Jewish addiction residential treatment center now. And one of the emails was from them, and I built a relationship, and now I'm in LA. So it's like, who knows where the world will take you? I'm still on the path. But it's been an amazing story that I could never believe would be possible. Living it, I almost don't believe it sometimes. But it's amazing.
Oh my gosh, there's so many good things you talked about. I want to give you a hug. I wish you were here, but you're not. You're in LA and I'm in Florida. But wow.
Thank you.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love hearing like how God works in people's lives and totally changes everything. And we talk about in the steps,
But I want to stop you for a minute. But God works in our lives, but we have to do the work. We are partners in creation. God is not going to do anything for us if we're not going to help do it for ourselves. God, I think, like shows us the path, but we got to walk it. And I think if you walk in the wrong direction, I just did a sermon this the other night. I think God will let you do that too. And God say, if that's, if you're not listening to like my call, what I'm saying, go. I'm not going to stop you. But God will take you where you need to go if you let God.
it's
Yeah.
so true because for one, we're
Yeah.
sinners, right? We're
Yeah.
born to be sinners, right? We're
We all
born
have
not to listen.
we are all deeply flawed people. And in Judaism, the way we say it is like we have what's called a Yetzer HaTov, a good inclination, and a Yetzer Hara, an evil inclination. We all have this in us. It's really like, what do you feed? What do you believe about yourself? And it's like that is just like fear and like we all have that fear in us. I mean, it's just like I want to hug everybody because I just want them to know there's a better way. There's a better way to live your life. But it's scary. You got to be vulnerable. You got to really work at it. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I'm so passionate about like, what this could mean for other people who are going through it right now. Because when you're in it, you don't believe it could be any other way.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
110%. That's why I started this podcast because I wanted people to know there could be a different way.
Yeah.
And what I find so interesting, and now I'm going to go talk a little bit about politics. What is going on in our world today is a lot of darkness, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of darkness thrown at us. When COVID happens, okay, when COVID happens, I'm going to start there. You lock people in their houses. They can't have any sense of community. And you keep the liquor store open. But
Yeah.
you close the churches, the synagogues, the mosque, whatever it is. You close it all. And you say, guess what? You can't go be around your people.
Yeah. So, COVID was a very it was a big shift in our society. Now, where we might see it differently is like, I don't see anything that, maybe some people were malicious. I don't see people as malicious. I see them as usually well-intentioned, but very misguided. For whatever reason, people make decisions that I think like sometimes are well-intentioned and then just like can go really bad. Um, COVID, if you believe that, people were dying, I could see how people thought this is what we needed to do. But people didn't realize too in COVID that isolation, um, no connection to community are also just as bad sometimes as viruses. I mean, and a lot of people had dealt with like depression and alcoholism and drug use, and that just that it skyrocketed. So, to me, it's like, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist. It might have been the exact right thing to do, but even if it was, it kind of ignored, only in retrospect can we see this, all these problems that were under the surface in our society that were prior to COVID. And that's also what tells us that we are very fragile. We live in a very fragile society. And right now, people don't trust anyone. They don't know who to trust. They don't know what to believe. There seems to be extremism all around us on all sides. And people are just very confused. So, what is the answer to that? I think the answer to that is a couple things. One, having strong family, friend circles, community. Being able to see the same faces of strangers in your life, or not even strangers, neighbors, they say is positive for our mental health. Being humble. Now, I want to say something about humility because
Hmm.
sometimes people think humility means putting yourself down or putting yourself up way too high. In Judaism, we say it's knowing your proper place in the world. I want to say that again because people think to be humble means to put yourself down, to debase yourself. In Judaism, we see it as knowing your true proper place to people and things. So that's really hard to know your proper place, but it means you need a lot of introspection. I think being that type of humility is really helpful. And then the last thing is like everybody says they're open-minded, they're really not. Everybody says they're compassionate, they're really not. I think like we all need to work on this, myself included. You talk about politics, it's so easy to like judge somebody. And I get it. Like when somebody disagrees with you politically, you think they're nuts. I was telling you, my father and I have been fighting about politics my whole life. He thinks I'm nuts about some things. I think he's nuts, but I love him and I respect him. I think when it says, like in scripture, to love your neighbor, I think that is the most important principle. But what does that mean? It's not talking about romantic love. I think to love your neighbor means to love somebody enough to want them to be better. To love somebody enough to say, you're on the wrong path. You can be in a better place. Now, that's advanced morality. It's being way easier just not to give a shit about anybody or anything. It's much harder to care about them. So to me, as a rabbi, I have Trump supporters. I had Biden supporters. I have them all coming to me. I try not to judge them based on their politics. They get that in the world. Everybody's judging everybody out there. I need them to feel like I'm the one person, and I might not agree with them on a bunch of different issues. There's Democrats I don't agree with on many issues. There's Republicans I don't agree with many issues. But like, I need people to feel like I'm going to see them as people, because people are people. And I always say this because there's a lot of conspiracy theories in the world right now. I always say, everybody's somebody you went to high school with. Nobody went to evil high school. Everybody's somebody you sat next to in science class. Now, everybody goes down the world in their different paths but it's always just somebody that somebody went to high school with. They were always some dweeb in high school or some jock or some homecoming queen. We all, so I think like when you think about it like that, it makes us think like, oh, they're just people. They're just people who like somehow rose to these heights to shape our lives, but it makes us frustrating when we feel helpless to change it. And I think that's the frustrating feeling. We feel so disconnected from like our politics and the people who are making decisions. Maybe it's a call for us to get more involved, to really be just more honest and open and not be so rigid in our politics, but to have humility to say, you know what? I can change. I can evolve. Maybe I felt this one thing, but enough data has showed me I need to think a little differently about it. Yeah, it's hard. I don't have all the answers. I don't think anybody has all the answers, but I think humility, community, introspection, all these things, they put you on a better footing. And then you can fight with everybody in your family about politics, because that's going to happen no matter what.
I loved what you said. And again, we mentioned earlier before we started recording, I have 18 years. So I've been doing this a really long time, and you've been doing it 13 years. And I just think that with the fear that's out there, and I think even people that aren't alcoholics, and drug addicts, we have a lot of fear right now. And today I talked about it on the podcast, that 464 that went out. And I said, we all are scared of this voice and this thing that's out there. And I related it to The Wizard of Oz, because we're in The Wizard. That's one of my favorite movies of all time. Like, we were all scared of the Wizard of Oz. And then Toto goes
Yeah, and
and pulls
that's in scripture. That's in what we call the Torah in the Bible. The Israelites, when they were supposed to go into the land, they thought they were giants. They looked at themselves like grasshoppers. They saw these tall walls. It was fear. What they didn't realize was the tall walls were because they were scared of them. They were not grasshoppers. They were normal sized people. But fear changes our perception of reality. And sometimes you need to be clear and sober to get that clarity. And I think a lot of people right now are very scared. And I don't want to discount their fears, because society is very fragile. Listen, the way I've been telling it to people is like, we live in a weird world. We live in a world where both nothing matters, like a comic can destroy our world in a minute, and everything matters. Every relationship, every action, every thought. Nothing matters and everything matters simultaneously. That's a weird world we live in, but it's the world we inhabit. And so I choose to inhabit the one of connection, of divinity, of seeing God in everybody, especially when I disagree with them. Because believe me, when people have crazy beliefs about politics or the world, it is so easy just to think this person is out to lunch. I try to think, why do they believe the way they believe? What happened in their life to get them to that place? What were their influences? What were their, because I really don't think people are malicious. You believe one thing. I've kind of got your politics a little. But when you tell me that, I think, well, what is this other person thinking? Why did they believe? So, I mean, I'm always working out that puzzle in my head. Yeah.
It truly is a puzzle because I can tell you that. I mean, in my own family, I've got a daughter who's totally left. We know I got kids totally
Yeah.
right. And I was actually talking about it on my podcast again just recently about how I was, I went and I'm just going to talk about it anyway again. I was in a Costco.
Yeah.
And I'm in this Costco in Austin, Texas. And this guy walks in and he looks like you. He's got his hair cut short, but he's wearing women's Lycra shorts, okay?
Yeah.
That are like Lululemon Lycra shorts that show all the junk. And
What did that make you feel?
oh my God. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Rabbi, you have no idea
Yeah.
how uncomfortable that made me feel.
Yeah.
And then he's got
But my question is, why did that
okay,
make you
I'm gonna keep going
Yeah.
though about the outfit. So then
Yeah.
he's got a bow in his hair, even though his hair is like short, like yours. Like he's got
Yeah.
a bow in his hair.
I find that to be very impressive, actually.
Okay, he's wearing the bow in his hair. His fingernails are painted, each one a
Yeah.
different color. He's got the spandex on.
Yeah.
And I wanted to go up to him and say, I'm a woman. Do you see I'm
Yeah.
a woman? I have boobs. I have really big hips. I've given birth. I'm like a mom. I'm
Yeah.
wearing a dress. I'm a girl. And I wanted to be, and it really, really sat with me so much. It was like for at least 24 hours. Okay.
Yeah.
I was upset by it. And I was like, what is it? And I just tried to get to God. I tried to get to that humility you talked
Yeah.
about. And I tried to get to this place of,
Because when you're saying it, I think it's more about you than him.
oh, it totally is. It's so
Yeah.
about me. It's
Yeah.
so
So it's
about
like,
me.
what is it about us that we get triggered by, because like to me, it's like we live in America. People are free to do whatever they want, but like, why are we getting so triggered based on what somebody else's outfit is? Because I think it's tapping into something deeper about our insecurity of the world we know. I don't know. I'm curious
I
what you
love
think.
that. I love
Yeah.
that you said that because I thought about it and as time went on because, I have family members that are grappling with this transgender stuff and everything. It's very close to my heart and home. And when I saw it, it was and I don't want to be that person that's judging, right? I don't want to be the person that's like, oh my gosh, I'm going to point a finger at you because I know when you point a finger out, there's three pointing back at me, right?
That's
And
very
it's
wise
about,
of you to have that introspection.
well, I'm always, well, you were talking about it earlier, like changing, like I know I am an onion and I'm constantly shedding a layer and constantly,
Yeah.
and I started off like going, if you don't vote, when I put down a drink 18 years ago, I started off with
Yeah.
like, if you don't vote like me or look like me or
Yeah.
go to the same country club, I can't be your friend. But
Yeah.
here I am 18 years later, trying to evolve, living in a world that doesn't look
Progress.
anything look
Yeah.
like my class that graduated in
Yeah.
1987, right? Probably the year you were born. Um,
86, but yeah.
yeah, exactly. So the year you were born, I was graduating from high school, and the year after the year after you were born, when you were one, and seeing this stuff and trying to get to this place of compassion. I'm recognizing I want to have a bigger heart.
Yeah.
I
And
want
you know how you could do that?
praying.
Sometimes it's just asking questions.
Yeah.
Asking people about their life experience. I mean, just like you're a podcaster. I would take that opportunity and be like, listen, and I think like people are scared to say the wrong thing. I think you should never be scared to say the wrong thing if you don't have hate in your heart. I would go up to somebody and be like, just curious. I don't understand this. Why are you wearing X? Or why, what's that about? I'm just curious. I need to know. Maybe they tell you to go F off. Maybe they tell you to know your business. Or maybe they tell you like why they, it's because as I said, I think we are feeling like the world is changing fast, and the world we know sometimes seems to be kind of like escape velocity. It's like leaving the atmosphere, and that worries people. I get that. I'm very sympathetic to that, especially with like technology and social media. The world is changing way too fast, and people just want it to slow down. And at the same time, you know, who are we to judge? Who are we to throw stones? However you want to put it. I mean, maybe that could have been your best friend. I don't know, but like I think we need to not have this spiritual deficiency in us. It's like a vitamin deficiency. When you're judging people, and listen, I have it in me too. I have it in me too. But I see it as a spiritual deficiency. And my supplements are, like I said, curiosity, humility, asking questions. I want to be fascinated by the world. I want to be fascinated people. I don't want to be like triggered everywhere I go. Like, yeah, there's things that like we don't want to, you got kids, you don't want like the craziest things like in like, but like I want to be a person who asks a lot of questions, who wants to understand people. I think it's important to me. I can't put that on anybody else. But yeah, I think you're doing the right work of like saying, this is about me. This isn't about them. Why am I reacting? I think that's always, you know what that is? Emotional intelligence. And we got a lot less of that today than IQ. People think everything's about intellect. Emotional intelligence is so important.
I love it because I always want to get smarter. I always
Yeah.
want to get, I want to, I'm going to just reference the 12 steps really quick and I'm going to let you go because I've had you for like over an hour now.
Oh, wow. Yeah, yeah. It's lunchtime here.
Okay, sorry. But I'm just having so much fun. But step one was admitting we're powerless and in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And powerlessness is a huge thing for me because I do believe, and I talk to I want to call them layman people that aren't alcoholics and addicts like we
Mhm.
are, and just tell them like the reality is none of us know what's gonna happen. The
Yeah.
reality is none of us know what's gonna happen. And number two, there is a God and it's bigger than me because
Yeah.
every human being is fallible. It doesn't matter. Here we go. And now we're finding Toto has opened the screen, I think, for everything right now.
Yeah.
Everything for good, bad, worse, whatever. And then we have to let go.
Yeah.
And that, my friend, I think for the past almost 18 years has been the hardest part. So seeing that person triggering me and
Yeah.
me having to go inside of myself and getting quiet and trying to find God in all of it and going, help me let go. I don't want to feel this ugly feeling because
Yeah.
it's dark, right?
But I
It
think
is
just
dark.
admitting it, yeah, it is dark. And I think admitting it is the light. And it's the light that's going to make you a better person. I have so much more respect for you, even though I might disagree with that, like politically, socially, I respect you for admitting that I don't want to be that person. Because I think like we feel like today we have to hide our thoughts, hide our beliefs. I
Mhm.
want people to admit them. If you feel like a lot of people were raised with racist parents or like kind of radical parents or all these different things, and like I want to know what are you doing to work on yourself to not be so convinced your way is the right way. It's a progress. It's something that I have not figured. I don't want anybody to think I figured all this out myself. I have not. But this is what I do to be at a little peace in the world. And I think it's a better way for me to be in the world for sure.
I think it is for me too. It has
Yeah.
been such a pleasure. Now, you guys,
It's
if you
been
want
a
to reach,
pleasure.
it's been so much fun.
Yeah.
I have just loved, I've loved talking to you, and I hope we can talk again.
Yeah, and if I'm ever in Florida.
You have to, if you come down to Florida, your
Yeah.
parents aren't here yet. They haven't left the Northeast yet to come to
No, they have
Florida.
not. They're still working, so they're
They're young. They're probably not much older than me. Let's be honest. Okay. They're probably a little bit.
they're they're doing their thing. Everybody's got to do their thing. I'm trying to get to retirement. Uh
He's not
No,
even
it's
40,
been a
you guys. He's
pleasure.
not even 40.
I
If you
know.
want to reach out to him, I'm going to have all of his information in the description, and you can reach out to
Thank you.
him and reach out to his facility.
By all
And
means, and I always welcome anybody to reach out with any thoughts or any questions. Absolutely.
I would love it. Well, until everybody, thank you for listening again. Subscribe if you like today's podcast, and you'll get a good next week. There's two, and if you want to get my newsletter that will come right into your inbox, go to my website at busylivingsober.com. And until next time, everybody, keep getting busy, living. Everybody.